The logging lane cut through the forest with the straight, practical determination of a path built for machinery rather than scenery. Gravel and packed earth formed its surface, layered and reinforced over years of hauling weight. Tire tracks pressed permanent patterns into its length, and fine dust settled into shallow grooves that rain later filled and erased. On either side, the forest rose dense and uneven. Spruce, fir, and birch stood close together, their trunks forming vertical shadows broken only by narrow shafts of light reaching the ground. The scent of resin and damp soil hung constantly in the air, intensified where recent cuts had exposed fresh wood. Beyond the immediate edge of the lane, undergrowth thickened quickly. Moss, fallen branches, and saplings creating terrain unsuitable for vehicles but familiar to wildlife. Morning activity began early. Before the sun fully cleared the treetops, the first logging trucks rolled into motion from staging areas deeper in the cut zone. Their engines vibrated through the forest long before their headlights appeared. Drivers followed scheduled routes, guiding heavy loads of timber toward processing yards miles away. Communication was routine. Radios crackled with updates about road conditions and spacing between vehicles. Visibility mattered. Timing mattered. The lane was wide enough for hauling, but not for complacency. Wildlife crossings were expected, and caution formed part of every driver's habit. That morning, mist clung low over the ground. Moisture from the night had gathered along the lane, softening sound and muting color. It was into this atmosphere that a moose approached from the tree line. Large, deliberate, and unhurried. He moved through brush with the quiet confidence of an animal accustomed to navigating dense terrain. Branches shifted aside under his weight. His dark coat blended with shadow until he reached the boundary where forest met open road. There, he paused. His ears turned. His nostrils sampled air carrying unfamiliar scents: diesel, dust, heated metal. The logging lane was not part of natural habitat, yet neither was it unknown. Over time, animals learn the patterns of human presence without interpreting their purpose. The moose stepped forward. Hooves struck gravel with dull, heavy contact. Each step carried weight enough to displace stones. He crossed slowly, head high, legs moving with steady coordination, shaped by terrain rather than urgency. Around a bend several hundred meters away, the first truck appeared. The driver saw movement instantly, a silhouette unmistakable even through light mist. Without hesitation, he reduced speed and signaled over radio. "Moose on the lane." The message traveled ahead to other drivers approaching from behind. Engines downshifted. Distances widened. No horn sounded. No aggressive maneuver followed. Experience dictated patience. Large wildlife could not be rushed or predicted safely. The truck rolled to a controlled stop. Behind it, a second vehicle slowed in sequence, maintaining spacing. Gravel settled. Engines idled. The lane filled with mechanical presence paused rather than pressing forward. In the open stretch, the moose continued crossing. He showed no alarm at the distant vehicles. Perhaps he sensed them, but judged their distance sufficient. Perhaps their halted motion removed urgency. He reached the opposite shoulder and stepped back into brush, branches closing around him as he vanished among trunks. Only then did the drivers resume. Acceleration came gradually. Radio confirmation passed along the line. The convoy moved forward again, careful but efficient, continuing the day's work through forest corridors shaped for timber rather than wildlife. Later that morning, another crossing occurred farther down the lane. This time, workers on foot noticed first, signaling trucks before the animal emerged fully. Again, engines quieted. Again, patience replaced haste. The lane's function paused briefly in recognition of something larger than schedule. Such moments rarely made record. They did not alter output figures or shipment totals. They simply formed part of the ongoing negotiation between industrial presence and natural movement, an unspoken agreement maintained through awareness and restraint. By midday, sunlight burned away the mist. The lane looked ordinary again. Trucks passing, dust lifting, engines echoing between trees. No visible sign remained of the morning crossing, except faint hoof impressions near the shoulder, gradually softened by wind and vibration. The moose moved deeper into forest shade. He carried no memory of halted vehicles or cooperative drivers, only continuation of travel shaped by instinct and terrain. Yet his passage had influenced the morning nonetheless. The trucks had waited back, and along that gravel corridor between timber stands, the balance between movement and pause continued, one crossing at a time. By late morning, the logging lane had settled into its working rhythm. The first haul of the day was already moving toward the mill, and the second wave of trucks was spaced along the road like slow, patient beads on a string. Engines echoed between trees, then disappeared into the forest's dense muffling. Dust rose behind tires and hung briefly in sunlit pockets before falling back to the gravel. To the drivers, the lane was not scenery. It was a corridor of responsibility. Weight limits, blind corners, soft shoulders, and unpredictable wildlife were constant considerations. Most of them had learned to read the road the way others read weather, through small cues, fresh tracks in the dust, broken brush along the edges, birds lifting suddenly from the ditch line. That day, the birds lifted more than once. A raven launched from the shoulder ahead of the lead truck and crossed the lane, wing beats slow and heavy. Another followed. Ravens often hovered near logging sites, drawn by scraps and opportunity, but they also responded sharply to wildlife movement. When they shifted suddenly, it meant something was changing in the woods. The lead driver noticed. He eased off the throttle slightly, not stopping, just reducing speed. Through the windshield, the lane curved gently left between taller spruce. Sunlight filtered in thin, slanted lines, creating alternating bands of brightness and shadow across the gravel. Visibility was decent, but the forest edge remained dense enough to hide anything large until the last second. Behind him, another truck maintained distance, following at a safe interval. Radio chatter moved quietly between them, short confirmations about spacing and road conditions, nothing urgent. Then the static broke. "Hold up! Moose sign ahead!" The message came from a pickup farther down the lane, a supervisor vehicle moving in the opposite direction. The voice was calm, clipped, practiced. The lead driver responded immediately, acknowledging and reducing speed further. His foot shifted, engine tone lowering. He scanned the shoulder. There, at the edge of the lane, were prints. Hoof marks pressed into soft dust near the ditch line, fresh enough that their edges were still sharp. A branch along the shoulder had been bent, leaves still trembling slightly, as if something had passed through moments before. The driver didn't need to see the animal yet to know it was close. He signaled with a brief tap of the brake lights to alert the truck behind. The second driver responded with the same controlled slowdown. The convoy began to compress slightly, but not dangerously, closing space in anticipation of a possible stop. Around the bend, the forest opened briefly into a small clearing. In that clearing, the moose stood. Not on the lane this time, but just off it, half in brush, half in open space. It was a large bull, heavier than the silhouette seen earlier that morning. The wide slope of its shoulders and the dark mass of its neck gave it a presence that seemed almost immovable. Its head was turned toward the road, ears angled forward, nostrils flaring as it sampled air. The lead truck slowed nearly to a crawl. He did not honk. He did not rev the engine aggressively. Experience taught that sudden noise could push a moose into panic, and panic near a logging truck meant chaos and danger. He held steady, allowing the vehicle's size and idling vibration to exist without escalation. The moose watched. Its eyes tracked the moving machine, and its posture remained rigid, alert, evaluating. A moose in this state did not behave predictably. It might step back into cover. It might step forward onto the lane. It might hold position until it decided the threat was not immediate. The driver stopped fully. Gravel settled beneath the tires. Engine idle deepened. The truck behind stopped as well, leaving a safe gap. Farther back, additional trucks received radio updates and slowed, forming a staggered line of waiting vehicles down the lane. The moose shifted its weight. One foreleg lifted, then set down again. It took a step forward, then paused. Its body was still partly hidden by brush, but the direction of movement suggested the lane was in its path. The driver's hands stayed steady on the wheel. He watched, calculating distance and options. Reversing was difficult with multiple trucks behind, but it was possible if necessary. The safest choice, however, was often the simplest. Wait. Let the animal decide. Let it cross without pressure. Minutes passed. In the forest, sound seemed amplified. Wind moving through needles, the occasional crack of a branch. The convoy sat in a quiet line, engines idling, no one speaking unnecessarily. Then the moose stepped out. Hooves hit gravel with dull impact. Dust lifted around its legs. It moved slowly at first, not running, not frightened, simply crossing with the same deliberate pace seen earlier. It angled across the lane toward the opposite tree line. The lead driver stayed, stopped. He watched the moose's progress carefully, waiting until all four legs were off the road and the animal's body had cleared the shoulder. Only when branches closed behind it did he shift gears and roll forward again. The radio crackled with calm confirmations. Moose crossed. Copy. Hold speed. Stay alert. The convoy resumed, but something remained different after that stop. Drivers carried heightened attention now, scanning shoulders more intensely. Wildlife crossings were common, but a bull moose at close range had a way of sharpening the mind. It reminded everyone that the lane belonged to no one completely, no matter how much gravel and steel had been placed on it. At a later staging point, a loader operator mentioned the sighting. He had seen moose tracks near a pile of fresh-cut timber. Another worker nodded, saying he'd seen browse marks on saplings near the ditch. The animal was moving along the corridor, using the cleared edges as easier travel routes, just as it sometimes did during certain seasons. This was not unusual, but it was notable. Logging activity altered the landscape in ways animals responded to. Open lanes made travel easier. Fresh regrowth attracted browsing. And the sound of engines, while intimidating, also formed predictable patterns that some wildlife learned to navigate. By mid-afternoon, clouds drifted in. Light dimmed under thicker cover, turning the lane into a darker tunnel between trees. Visibility decreased. Drivers slowed slightly, spacing wider again. The risk of another sudden crossing increased as shadows deepened, and somewhere within those shadows, the moose continued moving, unseen now, but close enough that its presence shaped human behavior all the same. The trucks kept hauling, but they hauled with caution, because the next crossing might happen around the next bend, and the only safe response to something that large and unpredictable was the same as before. Wait back, hold steady, and let the forest move at its own pace. By late afternoon, the logging lane began to shift toward evening rhythm. The steady procession of loaded trucks continued, but the light changed first, filtering through trees at sharper angles, turning dust clouds amber before letting them dissolve into shadow. The forest felt deeper now, quieter between passing engines, as if reclaiming space that daytime work had borrowed. The drivers felt it in small ways. Visibility tightened where shadows pooled across bends. Reflections from headlights became more noticeable on metal surfaces ahead. Radios carried slightly longer pauses between transmissions as concentration increased. The final runs of the day required the same discipline as the first, sometimes more. At a staging turnout several kilometers down the route, one convoy paused briefly to coordinate spacing for the last haul. Engines idled low. Drivers stepped out to stretch legs, boots crunching gravel. The smell of heated brakes and pine resin mixed in the air. Someone mentioned the moose sightings earlier. Nothing dramatic, just confirmation that it was still moving through the area. No one joked about it. Encounters with animals of that size were handled with respect, not bravado. Everyone present understood the consequences of underestimating weight, speed, or unpredictability. Soon, engines restarted. The trucks rolled out one by one, their headlights cutting through dimming forest corridors. Dust rose again, softer now in cooler air. The lane stretched ahead in familiar curves, but the feeling of distance grew as daylight receded. Several kilometers ahead, movement returned to the road. The moose approached once more. He emerged from underbrush at a narrow section where trees leaned closer to the shoulder. Twilight masked his shape until he stepped partly onto the lane, body silhouetted by fading light behind him. His gait remained steady, not hurried, not cautious, simply following instinctive travel patterns through terrain that included the human-cut corridor. The lead truck saw him first. Headlights caught the reflective glint of eyes and the outline of legs. Brakes engaged smoothly. The truck slowed and then stopped well short of the crossing point. "Moose on lane, full stop," the driver radioed. Behind him, confirmations echoed back through static. Each truck responded in sequence, reducing speed, widening gaps, bringing several tons of machinery to controlled stillness along the gravel. Headlights formed a staggered line of illumination. Within that light, the moose paused. He turned his head slightly, ears pivoting, considering the brightness and low engine vibration. For a moment he stood still, framed between beams. Dust settled around his legs. No horn sounded, no engine surged. The lane remained patient. After several seconds, the moose resumed movement, stepping fully across. Hooves struck gravel with heavy rhythm. His silhouette passed through overlapping cones of light until he reached the far shoulder and disappeared once again among trunks and shadow. The drivers waited longer this time. Night reduced visibility beyond the beams, and moose sometimes doubled back unexpectedly. Only after careful scanning did the lead driver ease forward again. The convoy followed, maintaining cautious pace through that stretch. The final miles passed without incident. Trucks reached the processing yard one by one, unloading timber beneath floodlights that erased twilight entirely. Engines shut down. Paperwork completed. The day's operations concluded with routine efficiency. Back along the lane, darkness settled fully. The forest resumed dominance. Wind moved through branches. No headlights cut between trees now. The gravel road lay quiet, holding only fading tire warmth and soft imprints of hooves near its edge. The moose continued deeper into the woodland. His journey followed patterns older than any logging schedule. He carried no awareness of halted vehicles or coordinated caution, only the continuation of travel between feeding grounds and shelter. Yet his crossings shaped the day nonetheless. Trucks had waited. Schedules had paused. Human motion had yielded, briefly and respectfully, to something moving with equal claim through shared terrain. By morning, tire tracks would overlap hoof prints again. Engines would return. Mist might rise from the lane as before. And somewhere near the tree line, the possibility would remain that another crossing would come, another radio call would sound, and once more the heavy machines would hold back, allowing forest and road to negotiate passage in the only practical way they could.